Welcome everyone. Hope you had a good week. So we are going to pick up looking at today and next Friday. We're going to talk about remote auditing. So we're particularly focused on clinical investigator sites. So if you think about remote auditing within the hierarchy of remote auditing, for example, clinical investigator sites are actually one of the more difficult audits to do remotely. I would say in my experience, IRBs are the easiest, followed by sponsors and CROs, and then our investigator sites, followed by labs in terms of complexity, simply because of all of the things that have to be reviewed. We know that when we go out and look at a site and do an audit, there are a lot of things that we have to physically see about that facility, trying to discern process flow. But we're going to talk about the areas as we go through an approach to how the FDA will do an inspection, and we also have some information about how EMA is doing remote inspections. We'll talk about how we can use those tools to help guide us in our remote audits. So we're going to talk about these sites and what it means for us to review remotely. We know that we are still a bit of a ways off from going out. I know that some folks are starting to go out now. So the inspections have opened up, but I also know some of my friends in Europe are now going out and doing on-site audits. So I've been doing this for quite some time. It's the first time during a pandemic, but what we see is an adaptation of what we would typically do at the site level. So core things to understand is that we are going to still be assessing that investigator for all of their regulatory responsibilities. How we do that is what changes, obviously. So we're going to go through this module, and we have quite a bit of slides. Some of them are going to be more for your reference. Some of them, a big chunk of them, are for your review, for homework for next week. Looking at regulatory review and quality assurance. So what is it we do, and how are we supposed to go about doing it? If we are supposed to be assurers of quality, what does quality look like? We'll talk about quality systems and systems versus process audits, making sure that we are focused on what really matters that's going to give us the best insight as to what is happening at that site. We'll focus, obviously, as we said, on clinical investigator site audits, on-site versus remote, what is going to be critical to assess, and what are some things that we can say, we need to come back and assess this at a later time. We can get this much information, but we're not going to be able to get a full assessment, which is okay. We will also look at establishing flexibility in protocol implementation planning. So the FDA put out guidance that they've updated multiple times, came out I think March of last year. Last update was January of this year, in terms of how do we conduct studies during a pandemic. So we're going to look at the purpose and process of audits, talk about clinical investigator quality systems and subsystems and processes that support that quality system. We'll look at risk assessments to inform the remote audit planning, what is going to be critical for us to assess given what our protocol requires. Look at the use of technology to verify objective evidence. As auditors, we gather factual, objective evidence, and technology is our greatest tool right now. I was just having a talk with a group last night, and the question was, what do you do with a site that's all paper-based? How do we get that information? And there's certainly challenges there. Where are we with things? There are some things, as the FDA said, there are some things that if you don't believe that you can keep your eye on safety and know what's going on, then maybe we should suspend that study, or maybe we shouldn't start that study. So we'll talk about some challenges and potential solutions to those virtual audits. As we said, we are maybe not going to be able to do everything 100%. I was reading an audit report yesterday evening, actually it turns out being this morning, but reading this audit report, reviewing it for someone who has a meeting this morning, and it was an audit report of a remote audit of a phase 1 facility. And it was striking the questions that were not asked, that could easily have been assessed just by asking the question. You didn't have to physically be present to ask these questions. And the sponsor of the audit was concerned that those questions weren't asked, and the response from the auditor was, well, it was remote, I couldn't see that. So even if we can't see where your documents are stored, we can ask about the process. We can ask about a location. We can ask for a facility map. We can ask about the condition of those records. Are they stored in fireproof, waterproof cabinets? So we do have challenges, but there are ways to adapt to them. And we'll look at some ISO standards, Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative, Transcelerate, and FDA guidance as well. We'll do that next Friday. Any questions so far? Sound like you guys ended up in the right place on a Friday morning? Virtual tours, great question. So some of the places that I have done virtual audits, like they weren't even physically allowed to go into their own office. This was earlier on. Their states were on lockdown. So virtual tours, as long as we can guide them, if that makes sense. I have seen where people say, here's somebody went in and they kind of walked around the facility with a camera and then they record it and they send it to you. This has to be something that's in real time because I need to say, what's over there? What's that? So it's kind of like if someone pre-selected the charts that you were going to review, think about that. How would you feel as an auditor if you say, I need to see subjects 1, 7, 11, and 14, and they're like, no, you just need 1, 2, and 3.